Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Dana and this is Delighted to DIY. If you like thrift flips and budget home decor DIYs, why don't you consider hitting that red subscribe button. In today's video, I'm bringing you some Halloween dupes to show you just how easy it is to make some high-end looking Halloween decor for your house and porch on a tiny budget. The first one, I pulled some inspiration from Michael's. There was no way I was going to pay $20 for a Halloween countdown sign. So instead, I took to Dollartree and found this wood board, which is perfect because there's no tearing anything off, no covering the back. Well, actually, I do cover the back because I didn't paint the back, but you know what I mean. It's a blank slate that you're just ready to go with. A sign will work in its place if you can't find these wood signs, but if you do, make sure to grab them because they're awesome. So I started by removing the tag, which was, of course, giving me some trouble, so I just heated up with my heat gun. Sorry, guys, for my nasally voice. I am a bit under the weather, so my voice is not exactly the same, but I'm going to try my best to get through this for you guys because I haven't brought you a video in a while because I have been under the weather, but let's keep going the best I can. So I did flip the sign over to the front, or at least where the tag wasn't, and began by giving it a good coat of black acrylic paint using my sponge brush. I used my heat gun to dry the first coat only because I was in a hurry to try and get these done. So you can always obviously let it dry, use a hair dryer. It's your choice. So I dried the first coat and added a second coat. I then gave the edges a good coat of the black acrylic paint as well. Today's video is part of another open playlist challenge. This time it's hosted by the queen of DIYs, the wonderful and talented Heidi Sonboul. I will have a link to her channel in my description box below. If you haven't checked her out, which I'm sure you have, why don't you go head over after watching my video to check her out. You'll find really great DIYs. And her challenge for us YouTube creators this time around was a fall challenge where we were to create a Halloween or Thanksgiving DIYs. I went with Halloween, so I hope you enjoy them. With my Cricut, I cut out this design. This is an SVG that I paid for over on Creative Fabrica. It was $3.20, which usually I don't like to spend that much, but it was really cute. And again, because I'm under the weather, I didn't really have time to make one myself. So there's awesome SVG files that you can find on there. And a lot of the times, every week, there's dollar deals. And some of them are just fantastic. Like, I'm seriously addicted to Creative Fabrica. There's fonts, there's watercolor images, there's anything you could think of, you can pretty much find there. And they do offer a membership. I haven't applied for one or I haven't bought one yet, but I think in the near future I might because of how much I actually do spend on buying files from them. So anyways, once it was cut, weeded, and transferred onto the sign, I began by giving the whole stencil a coat of the black acrylic paint. I do a coat of black acrylic paint to help minimize any chances of bleeding that could occur. Usually I just do whatever color the background is, so in this case black, but if it's something that's not, say, a solid color, Mod Podge could also work in this instance where you give the whole stencil a coat of Mod Podge. When the black was dry, I went in with a few different colors to get the sign the way I wanted it to look, just to my own liking. You could really use any colors you want. You could do it all in white. You could do it all in orange. You could do it whatever color you want. I went in with some white all over, actually, because I knew that some of the colors I wanted to use were going to be hard to see over top of the black. So I did just give the whole stencil initially a coat of white, and then I gave a second coat of white to the parts that I wanted to keep white, and then went in with some orange, yellow, and purple onto different areas of the stencil just to mix it up and make it look nice. This was my first time using one of the Dollar Tree stencil sponges, and I must say I actually really like using them. They applied really nicely. I didn't have any bleeds, but then again, that could be the coat of black I put down first, but I don't know, something about them. I really enjoyed using them. They came in a pack of 3 with 3 different sizes, and I would suggest checking them out if you're looking for a new way to stencil. After everything was dry, I just quickly heated up the stencil, though I don't think this part was really necessary, and then began pulling it away from the sign and weeding out the centers of letters that were left behind. Unfortunately, the purple I used was too dark and it was too hard to read against the black. So my first thought was I could fix it by going over the purple lettering with my white paint pen. I wasn't happy with the results I was getting, so because it's paint, I just painted back over the purple lettering with the black acrylic paint, then recut the portion of the sign that was for the purple letters, reapplied it, re-stenciled it with a lighter purple, and moved on. If you make errors, don't be afraid. Usually, almost always, it's fixable, and let me tell you, I make enough errors. Flipping the sign over to the back, we're going to add a hanger. I just used some jute rope from Dollarama and my hot glue to hold it in place. To finish off the back, I used some craft paper from Dollartree, and I just roughly cut out the size I need, then use hot glue around the edges on the back of the sign, place on the paper, then just keep going till it's all glued down. And then to get a nice clean edge, I just use my sanding block from Dollar Tree and sand away from the sign in a downwards motion. Another option for finishing the back would be to just keep painting it black when you did the front, or if this is for yourself and you're not planning to sell it or gift it to anybody and you don't care what the back looks like, definitely don't have to finish it off if you don't want. I felt like the sign was missing the final touches, and at first I wasn't sure what it was. Then I thought, hey, it's a border. So I took my white paint pen and just gave it some faux stitching all the way around the edge of the sign, and that is it. I hope you like this one. I'll show you a picture that was my inspiration from Michael's. This one's slightly different, but I think it's just as cute, if not cuter, if I do say so myself. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments below. For the second DIY, we're going to start with 3, not 2 like I'm showing, but 3 of the long boards from Dollar Tree. I just started by removing any embellishments that were on them, as well as the jute hangers from the top and the staples out of the back. With spackling and my finger, I just filled in any of the holes that were left from where the staples were. I did this on all 3 of the boards. When the spackling's dry, just give it a light sand to smooth it all out. Next, we need to cut down our boards to 4 different lengths, or actually 3 different lengths. One board will be left fully the size it is, so fully intact. The next one I'm showing, I made a cut at 16.5 inches from the top of the board. I call the top of the board where there's no staple holes, so I went from there down 16.5 inches, then just used my square from Dollar Tree and a box cutter to score the board numerous times till it started to be able to bend. I bend it, then you can go in with scissors or continue with your box cutter to make a nice cut. You can also clean it up with your scissors and some sandpaper along the top to make it a little bit smoother if it's jagged at all. Make sure to keep both the pieces you just cut, as you'll need both of them for this project. Then with your third board, I just lined it up along the bottom with the other 3 to determine what height I thought I wanted. In this case, 19 inches worked well, so I measured out 19 inches and again repeated the same process with my Dollar Tree square and my box cutter, scoring the board numerous times till it was able to bend, and then broke it in half and sanded it and cleaned it up with my scissors and sanding block to finish it off. Next came the painting. I first started with the longest full-length board and painted it with a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint in Swiss Coffee. It's a bear color from Home Depot. I made sure to paint the sides and the tops and bottoms, but I didn't have to worry about the back as I covered it with craft paper later on in the project. The 16.5 inch board, or your second shortest board, is going to receive 2 roughish coats of the same color. So for me, it was my DIY chalk paint in Swiss Coffee. I gave it 2 rough coats because I didn't want the brown showing, but it didn't have to be super covered, if that makes sense. And again, I did the sides and top and bottom in the same color. The shortest board received 2 coats, as well as the sides and top and bottom of a homemade orange chalk paint. And for the last board, the 19-inch board, or your second tallest board, I gave it, I mixed up a green color that I liked because we're going to be making this one into a Frankenstein. So any green that kind of makes you think of Frankenstein will work here. I can't quite tell you what it is. As I said, I just mixed some colors together. But you're going to want to paint a couple coats on into about I'd say maybe 4 to 5 inches down from the top, and maybe do a third of the board the green color, as well as the sides of where the green is. When the green paint was dry, I took my pencil and freehanded some zigzags along the top of the green where it meets the brown, and this is going to be for Frankenstein's hairline. I then went in with black acrylic paint from Dollartree and just filled in all his hair following the lines I had just drawn onto the board. With the same black acrylic paint, I painted in from the bottom to just above the halfway mark of the board with the black paint to make his Frankenstein's body. Again, anywhere that you painted black onto the front of the board, do it along the sides and bottom and top as well. Next, I started adding on the faces to the boards. So for the shortest one, when it was dry, so the shortest one is the orange one, when it was dry, I just took my pencil and freehanded a simple jack-o'-lantern face on it. So I did 2 upwards facing triangles for the eyes, a downwards facing triangle for the nose, and a zigzaggy type smile. I filled these in with the black acrylic paint and a small paintbrush. With the longest whiteboard, I drew on some eyes and a mouth because we're going to be turning this one into a ghost. I freehanded with my pencil to give myself an idea of where I wanted my eyes and mouth and the rough shape I wanted. Then again, went in with the black acrylic paint and a small brush to fill them all in. Off camera, I thought this was on camera, but obviously it wasn't. Off camera, again, I took my pencil on the Frankenstein board and drew 2 circles for the eyes, a little kind of squiggly W shape for the nose, and kind of a squiggly mouth, as well as a scar shape along the top left side of his head. Then I'm going in with the small brush and the black acrylic paint to just clean up his hairline and fill in and go along the face shapes. Actually, scratch that. I don't go in with a small paintbrush to fill in the facial features. I actually used a black paint marker from Walmart. For the shorter of the 2 whiteboards, we're going to turn it into a mummy. So I used my pencil to draw some diagonal lines going downwards from about a quarter of the way down to the bottom of the board. Then I made sort of a triangle shape where it's going to be black with his eyes showing through, and then just a couple of diagonals going upwards above the eyes. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully you'll see what I mean. When I was happy with the placement of my lines, I went in with a brown paint marker. This is a Sharpie brand one. It wasn't working too well for me, but I think my daughter had got her hands on it. So anyways, I used a brown paint marker and just started tracing over the lines as best I could. It doesn't need to be super neat, as again, this is a mummy we're trying to create, and mummies definitely are not neat, and if they are wrapped, they're wrapped in stuff that's really old, so you don't want perfection here. Then I went in with my black paint marker and went over the lines I had made for his eyes. With a small paintbrush and black acrylic paint, I filled in the areas around the eyeballs and then also added in some black for his pupils. For the Frankenstein board and the ghost board, I used my white paint marker from Walmart to create Frankenstein's pupils as well as the ghost's pupils. Because the whites of the ghost's eyes were larger than Frankenstein, the paint marker wasn't working the best. So to get it a little more opaque, I went in over top of the paint marker with some of my homemade chalk paint in Swiss coffee. To make the boards look more rustic and worn, I gave each of them a dry brushing, fairly light dry brushing all over the fronts of the boards and concentrating more on the corners and edges. I did a black dry brushing on the ghost, mummy, and pumpkin, and then used white acrylic paint to do my dry brushing on Frankenstein. To create a stem for the pumpkin, I used a piece of wooden garden stake that I had from Dollarama and just cut it into the shape that I thought would look best. I then used my antique wax and a paper towel just to stain this so it was a darker brown. You could go in with acrylic paint also, or watered down acrylic paint, or even furniture touch-up marker from Dollartree. There's lots of ways you can do this. When I held the stem behind the pumpkin shape, I realized that it was a little too big and not quite the shape I wanted, so I just used my scissors to cut it down a little more. I glued it on with my hot glue and then just used a furniture touch-up marker to restain where I had cut. Then I went in with my hot glue and some craft paper from Dollartree and covered the backs of all the boards. I used my sanding sponge from Dollartree and sanded in a downwards motion away from the boards to remove any of the excess paper on the backs of each one. Lastly, it was time to assemble my boards. I did this with hot glue, but if you want a more permanent hold, I would suggest E6000 or Gorilla Glue or something more strong to give you a permanent hold. For me, the hot glue was fine, and I'll most likely use this inside or on a covered porch because it is MDF board. If you made this with real wood or scrap pieces of wood, I'm sure it would be completely okay out in the elements. But for now, this is how I've put these ones together. So with a generous amount of hot glue, I overlapped the Frankenstein board on the right side of the ghost. I put it over about maybe 2 inches, 1.5 inches. Then on the left side, on the left side of the ghost, I'm going to position the mummy shape and again use a fair generous amount of hot glue and glue it into place. I left about 1-inch space between those two, and then I went in with my pumpkin shape and glued it on with hot glue to the center, making sure to line up the bottoms of all the boards. And that was it for this Pinterest-inspired DIY. I was able to achieve this look for under $5, as all I needed was 3 boards from Dollar Tree and some paints, and I think it's absolutely darling. I will be so happy to display this Halloween season. I'd love to know what you thought of these DIYs, so why don't you let me know by leaving a comment down below, and if you liked it, give it a big thumbs up. Consider sharing it with other friends who might like it, and if you want to keep watching, here's some videos you might like. As always, thanks for watching, and if you want to see more of this content, like more DIYs and thrift flips, why don't you consider hitting that big red subscribe button to be notified anytime I upload a new video. Bye!